Welcome SBT fans, welcome back to another Power Rankings video. We have Mams and Tyler here. Tyler, you can say hi.
What's up, guys?
Alright, so you guys know the deal. We're here to talk about everyone's performances in the week 3. I know this video is coming out a bit later in the week, but that's normally how they do. But this time we're going to talk about week 3, and again, just like last week, we're going to have the previous week posted on the left side so that you guys can compare them to the rankings that we have on the right side, which is our week 3 rankings. We're going to start from D division again. We're going to work our way all the way up to A division, and hopefully we don't spend too long on each division. But without further ado, I think we can just jump right into D. Tyler, if you want to start us off.
So first off, at the bottom of the standings at number 16 this week is Daniel and My Horse, who faced Zach this week and could not find a way to overcome the Chicago Porter Knights this week.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you ended up watching that Zach's side, Tyler, but he did upload his match, which was really nice. And Zach actually pretty much dominated the match. He was able to set it up so that he had perfect control, and by the end of the match he saved all his win cons to make sure that he didn't lose to certain threats that Daniel bought. But I will say this for Daniel. I think he concentrates too much on the early game, and he needs to start prepping more for the late game. Start to see what you need to break down in order for your win cons to win in the later end of the match. But he's going to be sitting at number 16. He was originally at number 13, so he did drop a few places there. But moving up to number 15 now, we have Python and his Tennessee Toxicities, who did end up losing this week. He did have to face Steph, and it was a decent match from what I remember from it. Now, just a disclaimer, guys. We do Tyler and I tend to watch all the matches of the week, but there are 32 matches, and we're not always going to remember everything that happens in them. But if we can try to recall certain things that happened so that we can help you guys out. But Steph, he was able to overcome Python this week. And Python already sitting at number 15 last week, so because of his loss, he really didn't move at all. And that's going to be Python.
Next up at number 14, we got Harbor and his Snow Point Snow Runs, who faced Cami this week and had to drop 2 spots due to that loss, unfortunately. And Cami's offense was just too strong for Harbor's defense, as he couldn't contain it at all, and Cami just took the upper hand.
Yeah. Cami did a really good job against it, and Harbor again just couldn't recover. And again, Harbor was already sitting pretty low at number 12 last week, so with his loss, he just had to drop down a few spots. But at number 13, we have Bolus and his Boston Blissies, who faced off against Rozzy this week, and he got 6-0'd, which is not something that I normally tend to see too often. Bolus tends to be one of the stronger coaches that every single season, but always is kind of inconsistent with his plays. But getting 6-0'd by Rozzy, on a whole nother level, he knew exactly how to pivot around Bolus, and Bolus just could not touch the combination of Rozzy's, I believe it was Blissey or Chansey, and then always pivoting out right into the Gallade so that he can break down Bolus' team. It was just too much for Bolus, and he could never get the upper hand, unfortunately. So, that's why he's sitting at number 13.
Next up at number 12, we've got Nico and the Spartan Samurats, and Nico faced Sai this week, but unfortunately Sai had the upper hand from the start. Nico almost brought it back, but he just couldn't deal with the threats that was thrown at him, and he had to drop down 3 spots to number 12.
I agree. I also know that Nico is on vacation right now, I believe, and he just didn't have that much time. But moving up to number 11, we got Gannon and his Cranborn Crowbats, who did move down quite a lot this week. As you guys can see on the left side there, Gannon was at number 5. Now he's sitting at number 11. And that's because he went up against Paco, who pulled off quite the upset this week. Ended up getting a 6-0 versus Gannon, which is, something I haven't really seen from Gannon. It was either a poor performance on Gannon's end, but Paco really knew how to pressure Gannon, and he was able to get into the right positions. It was almost like I was watching someone else play for Paco, but Gannon definitely had to move a couple spots down to number 11.
Next up at number 10, we've got Wolf in the Brampton Nurseries, who finally got his first win this season, and pretty convincing 3-0 against John, as Wolf never really looked back, because he still had a few answers in the back even when it was finished. So props to Wolf for having a pretty convincing win and moving up 6 spots all the way up to number 10 this week.
I agree. And again, John we had rated pretty high up at number 4. So the fact that Wolf at number 16 was able to bring him down, very, very impressive from Wolf. I want to see more from him this coming season, these next coming weeks. But even with, like you said, with that dark pulse flinch on from the Thunders to his Mew, Wolf still had responses in the back, even with the weakness policy popping. I think he had a rock polish up. I'm not sure, but all that.
John went for the rock. John went for the rock polish, but the dark polish flinch stopped him. And the Talon Flame was still at full in the back. So
the Gale Wings could have come into play there as well. So who knows exactly, but Wolf did end up with the win there. So he sits at number 10. So at number 9, we move up to Cy and his Texas Toxicities, who did move up 1 spot due to his win against Nico this week. He only moves up 1 spot just due to the fact that Cy and Nico were already pretty close in the last week's power rankings. So not too much of a change there, and the match did come down pretty close. It came down to a 2-0. I believe Cy did all that he could to pressure Nico's team. Cy really plays offensively, so it's no surprise that the differential was only at a +2. But he was able to come out with a win, and he's sitting. I think he's sitting actually where he originally started in the power rankings in the beginning of the season. So Cy kind of still sitting a bit lower than what he should to make playoffs. But I hope he continues this run and maybe gets some more wins.
Next up at number 8, we've got John and his Dubai Drapions, and John this week lost to Wolf, unfortunately. And even though it was a good match, John had to drop 4 spots this week.
Yeah, like we said earlier, Wolf was able to come out with the victory by the end of the match, and the flinch. Again, we could say how much it mattered, but it did end up costing John the match, and he drops 4 spots, like we said. So John's still sitting kind of in the middle there, so he still has ways to go, but definitely it was not his match this week. Maybe it was the matchup itself. But we can move up to our number 7, where we have Paco and his Charlatan Gastrodons. So Paco, of course, played phenomenally this week. Something that I wasn't expecting personally when I saw Gannon getting 6-0'd. But also mainly because Paco has been sitting at the bottom for the last couple of weeks. To see him jump straight to a 6-0, like I said, it was almost like watching a completely different person. And if Paco wants to continue this run, then I'm hoping to see more from him. And maybe it's just his prep. I really do like seeing him jump this high up. So keep up the good work, Paco.
Next up at number 6, we've got Steph and the Ontario Icarios. And Steph faced off against Python, like we said earlier, had a pretty convincing win. And it was good enough to bring him up 2 spots in this week's power rankings.
Yeah, I agree. Steph doing well. It looks like a lot of what I've noticed is that Steph uses that melodic very, very well. Like, a lot of the coaches can't break it for whatever reason. But the melodic itself does a lot of work during the match for him. It's his main response, his wall, and I think he just knows how to use his team effectively to get him to where he is. Right now he's sitting at number 6. So hopefully if he can keep it up, he might be able to climb into playoff contention. But for the sake of moving on, we got our number 5. We have Zach and the Chicago Corbinites, who won his match this week and moved up 2 spots. He won against Daniel, who is now rated at the bottom. So moving 2 spots up, it kind of makes sense. It's not too big of a deal. But Zach moving up, he had some interesting prep, and like we said, he showcased all that during his live comm of the match itself. I will say one thing for Zach, although he did win his match. The white herb halucha is getting kind of predictable now because he's been using it, I think, for the last 2 weeks. Not that it's a bad set, obviously, because you can close combat, drop your defenses, white herb, gives you the unburden, and you're free to just do whatever you want. But somewhere along the lines, I think it is going to get predictable. So if he wants to switch it up at some point, maybe he's just comfortable using that set. He does have a Bulu, so if he wants to run Bulu Lucha, he can definitely go ahead and do that. But good job from Zach, and he's definitely climbing back up to where he was originally.
So next up at number 4, we've got George and the Tectonic Typhlosions, who was finally dethroned last week after losing to Tyler B. And it was a pretty stallish match, if I must say, but Tyler's stall was just better, and George had no actual way to break Audino correctly.
Yeah, I agree. Finally seeing George drop after 3 weeks, and George played a good game, but there were moments where I think he was too passive in the match. I think he definitely could have been more offensive, especially in the early part to mid game, where he was adamantly trying to keep in Skarmory for whatever reason, instead of going into more offensive threats that could have pressured Tyler a bit more, because Tyler does have a really fat team and the Regenerator core. So George, he definitely had to move down a few spots there, and we know he's a good coach, and he has the best draft that we rated in the division, so he might be able to climb back up next week. But with that said as well, we can move up to our number 3, where we have Tyler B and his Villanova Toracats, who beat out George this week, and he moved up 3 spots. He climbed right into the number 3 spot, where he was sitting at number 2, I think, in the initial power rankings. But Tyler B, he did a good job. He was able to pretty much neuter George and his offensive capabilities at that. Like, with how fat Tyler's team is, it's almost like he really didn't have to predict much, which is a good thing for the most part. And I think he was just able to, pretty much stall out George and get into a good position where he could finally utilize his offense, and he pulled out the win. So congrats to Tyler for moving up.
Next up at number 2, we've got Cammy and the Loch Ness Lombres. And Cammy pulled off the win against Harbor this week, as we said earlier. And he didn't really look back that match, as Cammy just took control and smoothed it and sailed. He just went straight to that W, and he moved up 1 spot this week.
Yeah, Cammy, you might have expected him from his win. He was already sitting at number 3 last week to maybe move up to number 1 this week, but just due to our actual number 1, Cammy just moved up 1 spot. He's doing a really fantastic job in his season so far. It's early season, so the amount of wins that you get early season kind of matters. But grabbing the win against Harbor, and he did a fantastic job with that, kind of sits him at number 2, since Harbor was already pretty low on the power rankings itself. So just moving 1 spot up makes a lot of sense. But now we're finally going to go into our number 1 seed and the power rankings, which is going to be Rozzy. It's no surprise, and his 2 spoons, 1 Zam. He was at number 2 last week. Prior to that, he was at number 3, and then prior to that, he was at number 5. So he has not dropped from the top 5 so far throughout these power rankings. And I already said, Rozzy, he's the coach to beat this season. If you can beat Rozzy this season, you're definitely going to have a good run in D League. So everyone, just take notes because Rozzy is just a force to be reckoned with. He got a 6-0 against Bolus this week. I don't think he's looking to stop. He's definitely going to keep climbing up, and he can't go any higher than number 1. So I guess we're finished with D Division, guys. We can actually continue on to C Division. No stopping now. And Tyler, whenever you're ready, you can start us off with number 16.
So at number 16 for C League this week, we've got Ballistic and the Oregon Golducks, who are going to stick at the same spot as last week. And Ballistic just couldn't overcome Nathan this week. And that leaves him at the number 16 spot.
The number 15, we have Goomba and his Detroit Dittos. Already at number 15 last week, and because of his match this week versus Ryan, even though he pulled off a very close 2-0, -2, since Ryan ended up winning that match, he ended up losing, and he just could not move up. If we see this continuous loss streak from both Ballistic and Goomba, it might have to result in them always sticking to the bottom there.
Next up at number 14, we've got Griffin and his Rhyme City Ride-Ons. And Griff this week was facing off against Salabgo and absolutely got destroyed by that Clefable, if I have to say. But to be fair to Griff, his team build is really not...
It's not suited to face Stall.
It really isn't Clefable friendly. And Clefable pretty much takes out on preview. The second it started to set up, it was pretty much over.
You're not wrong. Griffin, he was at number 10 last week, and obviously we're going to see this from Griff a lot. Some weeks he's going to have a good matchup, and some other weeks he's going to have matchups that are going to cost him the entire game just because of one mon. And that's just the nature of Griff's team, is that hyper offensive team. It can't really deal with the balanced, more set up variant teams, such as a very strong Fairy, which Griff didn't really have any response for. He kind of had to hope for some flinches here and there. He kind of had to hope for some crits, and it just didn't work out in his favor, and he just absolutely got destroyed this week. So but it's only week 3 and there's still time to climb, so hopefully Griff can pull out the next following weeks. But sitting at number 13 now, moving up, we got Piran and his St. Louis Scissors, who ended up losing his match this week against Major. And it was pretty straightforward. When I'm watching Piran's matches, last week is at number 12, so he just dropped the 1 spot this week. When I'm watching Piran's matches, it kind of feels like he's almost rushing the match in a way. Almost to the point where he's just rushing to try to get to the end game as fast as possible. And yeah, you can do that if you know what your strategy is, if you think that that's going to get you the W in the end. But I think trying to scout out sometimes what your opponent brings, trying to initiate the long game first, or lure them into a false sense of security before you start bringing in your offensive sweepers, might be the more safer way for Piran to kind of adjust his style. I don't know if that's exactly how Piran plays, but just to me, it always feels like he's kind of rushing the match. So yeah, I would just like to see him kind of slow down and think about his moves a little bit more. But Piran, definitely a good player, solid for sure, and he has a good team. But yeah, that's going to be Piran at number 13.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Aaron and his Los Santos Septiles, who lost against Swampy this week. And due to that loss, unfortunately, Aaron had to go down 7 spots, and Swampy was rated at number 14 last week, and Aaron was still at number 5. So losing to one of the bottom seeds is grounds to getting demoted quite a bit. And Swampy never really looked back that match either, so it was a pretty comfortable win for Swampy.
Yeah, absolutely. If I were to say anything, I would also say the same thing with Aaron. He kind of just rushed the match as well. It almost felt like Swampy's prep just, Aaron could not get around it, and he kind of just stayed in with any mon that he was in with, and once they dropped, he brought in his next mon, and once that dropped, he brought in his next mon. I don't think he really had time to switch at all in this match. And it didn't really look like he had an end game either. I don't know, Aaron, he's definitely a good player, but he has his inconsistencies some weeks. Like, as you can see, last week he was sitting pretty high up at number 5, and before that he was sitting at number 16, and now he drops right back down to 12. So Aaron kind of bounces around sometimes. I'm not sure if that's just his nature or whatever's going on with him, but I like to see him keep a steady steady pace for the most part. But anyways, moving up to our number 11 spot, we got Sacred TD and his Los Angeles Dojo. So Sacred actually did end up dropping a few spots this week due to his loss against Gry. And Gry, definitely a good coach. We'll see him later on, but Sacred, he did really well in the match, I believe. It's just he didn't have enough breaking power, if I believe, to combat Gry's reign. It did come down pretty close, though, if I remember correctly. It's just it just wasn't enough for him this week, so he does have to drop down a few spots.
Next up at number 10, we've got Ryan and the London Lucarios, and Ryan played against Goomba this week, and with that win, Ryan went up one spot from last week, and it was a pretty good match on both ends, but Ryan came out on top of this one, and that win gets him one spot in the power rankings for this week.
I agree. Although Ryan played really well, he actually was always ahead in that match. I think he almost was trying to get to the end game as well. I see that a lot with some rushing, but he definitely had the game by like turn 15 or so. He had the game locked up, but he ended up having to sack a few mons just to get into the right position. So that's why it came down a bit closer than what it should have. But Ryan never, gave Goomba the control that he needed, because he always had the game locked up with his Infernape in the back, I believe. But he played it well. So at number 9, we have Swampy and his Seattle Swamperts, who move up quite a bit due to his win against Aaron this week, and we already talked about it. Swampy definitely prepped amazing this time around. He never gave Aaron any kind of potential to perhaps set up or gain any kind of momentum. Swampy pretty much just kept on pressuring him, kept on dishing out some new tech that Aaron could not handle. And you got to give him credit. Swampy really trying to climb back up, and I think he's doing well. He's already got his second win, he's going to be sitting at number 9 right there. He was at number 14 last week, and let's see if he can keep on climbing this week.
Next up at number 8, we've got Celebgo and the Copenhagen Canines, and with that pretty convincing win over Griffin, Clefable goes up 5 spots in the power ranking this week. I think Clefable probably jumped up a few spots in the kill leaders too, so
I'd imagine
it's safe to say Clefable carried Celebgo up carried Celebgo up 5 spots in the power rankings this week.
So the match was basically Celebgo bringing Rabombi and Clefable, and that's all he needed. I can't even remember what the rest of his team was, but all he did in the beginning of the match, he brought in Rabombi, he set up webs, he let Rabombi drop. He took down the Weavile first, and he was focus sash. Then he set up the webs on Hippowdon. Then he brought in Clefable. Clefable was able to set up on that Hippowdon, and it was just a wrap. So from turn 1, Celebgo had the game. Like, he knew exactly what he needed to do to win the game, and that's exactly what we need to see from coaches that are trying to climb to the top. So good job. He definitely climbs up there. Number 7, we have Major and his All Asian Almamolas, who actually finally got a win this week. We've been waiting for him to get some kind of a win. The last couple of weeks, he's been facing coaches that are pretty strong and high up on the power rankings. This time he faced off against Piran, who isn't too low on the rankings, but not really high either. That doesn't bode well too much for how Major is going to do when he faces off against stronger coaches, but it also means that he still can shine when it comes to facing coaches that have a bad matchup against him. So sitting at number 7, I feel is a really comfortable spot for Major right now. and hopefully, he gets out of his comfort zone and starts really coming back in this next couple weeks.
Next up at number 6, we've got Nathan and his Charlotte Chimchars, and Nathan actually beat Ballistic this week. So even though it was a pretty close match at a 2-0, it's safe to say that Nathan still won pretty comfortably and earned that one spot up in the PRs.
Yeah, I'd agree. Moving one spot up in the PRs is not too much of a change. I think it's more people have to get shuffled due to more impressive showings or less impressive showings. But he had to beat the coach ranked at number 16, which gets him some credit. He moves up one spot, and I think Nathan deserves that spot at number 6. So. But above him, sitting at number 5, we have Ghost and his Brisbane Zera Aura fan club, who actually finally lost a match this week, and he drops down 3 spots. He lost his match against Quality this week. Quality Content, QQ. He did an amazing job. Quality brought some interesting sets. He was able to keep up with Ghost a lot this match, and he was able to pull out the win. Ghost, he tried everything in his power to come back, but Quality was always a step ahead, I think. And Ghost just had to drop a few spots. He was at number 2 last week, so number 5 this week. It kind of just makes sense for him. He still has a really good team, still a really good coach, but Quality knew exactly how to pressure Ghost's team, and he was able to beat him out in the end. So it's Ghost at number 5.
Sitting at number 4 this week, we've got Brian and the Peterborough Palpitotes. And with that win over Sacred this week, he just stays put at number 4 in the PRs, as it doesn't, that match was really close, and we couldn't really justify bringing him up some more above the other coaches in the top of the PRs. So Brian just sits still at number 4 this week.
Yeah, I'd agree. Because the 3, 2, and 1 spots are reserved for our coaches that are doing absolutely phenomenally, and they're beating out coaches that were ranked really high as well. Gry, it's not that he's not performing as well, but he is facing coaches that are lesser on the power rankings right now, and that's kind of why he's not moving up too many spots. Just sitting at number 4 again from last week. We couldn't move him up against the 3 that are above him, who you'll see played really amazingly this week. And now that we say that, I'm going to move up to our number 3 in Quality Content in the Karakovs, who move up 3 spots this week because of his, like we said, his win against Ghost. And he did a really fantastic showing. I was very impressed with the Choice Banded Sleep Talk Last Resort Kamala that he brought. It's not something new that I've seen before, but it is a very good mon when there's not too many resists to a last resort, like a stab banded last resort from Kamala. Definitely does some work to the opposing team. But Quality, he had a great showing and was able to beat one of the top coaches in the rankings. So he's sitting at number 3.
Next up at number 2 this week, we've got Wavali and the Seattle Mariners, and he got dethroned last week after losing to Rin by a pretty close 2-0, and it was probably the match of the week last week, as both coaches really went at it, and it was a very fun match to watch, as both coach has threats, and both coach answered correctly to all the opposing threats, and Rin just got the upper hand after that match.
Yeah, I agree. And just like D Division, another dethroning of number 1. George number 1 in D Division got dethroned, and Wavali in C. We might see Wavali eventually, jump back up. I was saying in this last week, but the top 5 coaches there, I think they're just going to be bouncing up between each rank. And it's kind of hard to place them every single time, but because Wavali was facing up against the number 3, the number 1 versus number 3, very good match and very good showings on coach's part. Could have gone either way, and Rin actually was able to end up with a 2-0 at the end. But Wavali just moving down one spot. I still think he deserves that number 2 spot. He's shown in these previous weeks that he's able to decimate his opponents and keep up with them for the most part. So we'll see if he's able to continue his win streaks for the next couple for the next couple weeks. But at number 1, we're gonna have our obvious coach and Rin and his Las Vegas Ludicolo, who, like we said, ended up beating out Wavali this week. It was a very good match. He was able to pressure Wavali to the point where he was able to get into a good position where he was able to just make sure that the Gallade did not run through him, because I know that Wavali's just been doing that for the past couple of weeks. But Ren moves up 2 spots, finally sitting at number 1. It's been a while, but he finally climbed up to that number 1 spot, and let's see if he can hold it. There's a lot of coaches here trying to climb up to that number 1 seeding, but good job on Rin for taking that number 1 spot.
Up to B League now, sitting at number 16. For the second week in a row now, we've got Rummy and the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, and Rummy faced off against Riss last week, and Riss's team was just too much to overcome. So Rummy unfortunately had to stick down at number 16 for one more week.
Yeah, I agree. Rummy, he tries very hard, and I know how good of a coach he is. Rummy definitely had a hard time trying to break Riss's team. The interesting thing is Riss, I think, prepped for the wrong team, because I'm not sure if he thought that the doc wasn't updated or what have you, but he didn't exactly bring the right stuff. But not to say that Riss didn't do amazingly. He was still able to pull out that win. And Rummy, he was already sitting at number 16. Rummy has been pretty low on the rankings for the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, and we don't want to see him always sitting at that number 16 spot. So hopefully he can continue to climb up the next couple of weeks. But above him, sitting at number 15, we have Witchard and the Superior Snoms, who didn't move at all again. He was sitting at number 15 last week, and he just he got completely destroyed by PZZ this week. I'm sorry to have to say, but PZZ sitting at number 2 from last week. Witchard could just not go around PZZ's wall core. There was just too much happening on PZZ's end that Witchard just couldn't break, and he didn't position his Pokemon properly. But it's still Witchard. He did do a fantastic job of trying, but in the end it still just was not enough. PZZ's core with Teleport and Parting Shot, just able to get into his offensive threats, and Witchard just could not position himself properly. He always had to continuously sack Mons to that Medicham, and he tried his best, but unfortunately, he just could not beat out the number 2 ranking.
Next up at number 14, we've got Crow and the Virginia Bikinis, who, after losing to Juke last week by a pretty big margin, Juke's been playing really well lately, and that 5-0 was that 5-0 shows it, and Crow had to go down a few spots all the way down to number 14 this week following that loss.
Yeah, I agree. Crow, I know he's capable of doing very, very well in leagues. I don't know if he's not getting the right matchups or he's just not comfortable with his team yet. I still think Crow has an amazing team, and seeing him this low kind of hurts. But I know that he'll eventually find his footing. If he has to move some Mons around, do some free agencies, what have you, then that could be the case. But I think Crow did play the early game well. I will say, though, unfortunately, his Conkeldurr, although it was nice to bring Defog on it because he was able to get rid of screens, he was able to get rid of rocks, it didn't really do much else in that match. Like, Conk with defog is very nice now, but um, it kind of just dropped as soon as he defogged. Like he kind of just let it remove hazards, remove screens, and then it just dropped in the end. A very offensive Mon that could have been maybe used in the late game, just kind of just let go really early on. And I would like to see Crow maybe preserve some of his Mons better, and that could kind of help him understand what to keep in the late game, what to stop him from getting swept potentially, that sort of thing. Because I don't know if he had Mach Punch on the Conk or not, but Magneton on Juke's end really went in against Crow's team. Like, I'm pretty sure Magneton got maybe 3 or 4 kills that match. And having Mach Punch in the back with Conk might have actually stopped that from happening. So, I don't know. Crow, I know he'll do well. He just has to bounce back and find his his comfort for this team again. So, let's see if he can continuously keep growing. But at number 13 now, we have Charles and his Pittsburgh Prinplups, who did have to move down quite a lot of spots this week, just due to him getting 6-0'd against Joel. Joel, one of our newcomers in B League because of Dick's dropping, but Joel was finally able to use his new team, which he was able to pick out himself after Dick's draft and his drop. And Charles, he could not get around the fact that Reuniclus, Joel brought the right Reuniclus set, the powerful Reuniclus set, and Charles he didn't bring his Hydreigon. It's interesting when you see a Reuniclus, you need to make sure that you bring a Dark type, just because of the fact that you bring a Dark type or you bring something that can taunt the Reuniclus. Because if Reuniclus gets up an Iron Defense and it gets up a Calm Mind, and you don't have a Dark type in the back, you're definitely gonna get stored powered all over. You're gonna get psychicked. It's not a good time. Maybe Charles was planning for Joel's other threats, but not bringing the Hydreigon, I think, was the wrong play this time around, because he did end up getting 6-0'd, so he does have to drop a few spots there, unfortunately for him. Oh, I believe he did have Roar on Steelix, so that was nice. He was able to phase out the Reuniclus.
So next up at number 12, we've got Leonard and Diazal Falkmar. And Leonard played against Adam this week, and unfortunately, he got crit on Necrozma. But Hacks played a part, but losing to Hacks is, I don't want to say like asking for it, but when you put yourself in that position, you can't really complain after the fact. So yes, it is unfortunate, but when you're playing for Hacks, it's never really a good option to win. And following that loss, Leonard had to drop 3 spots to number 12.
I agree. I hate to have to drop Nard like that. Because I know that he was trying to put himself in a good position, and for his sake, I will say that the Necrozma probably would have won the match if he was able to set it up properly. I think what he needed to understand is that you do have to risk getting crit, you do have to risk getting status, you do have to risk all that stuff early on in the match if you're planning on setting up with your sweeper. So I would have actually liked to see him maybe scout more, maybe preserve Necrozma for the late game to set up on something. Because you could have set up on, something else that wasn't 2-hit KOing you. And not to say that crit was justified in any sense. Like, getting crit after you start setting up and then your win con just dies like that, it's never a good feeling. I know it can tilt some people. But like I said, preserving it, maybe keeping it for the late game and then start setting up with it, making sure that like all the threats for it are removed before you start setting up. It could have been the difference, but you could never really tell. So Leonard just has to drop down. But at number 11, we have Juke Loans and his Malibu Morwells, who moved up 2 spots because he faced off against Crow this week. He's just taking over the spot that Crow was originally in last week. Crow was at number 11, and now Juke is at number 11. Juke did get a very convincing 5-0 against Crow, but even with that, Crow and Juke, they were still on the lower end of the power rankings. So Juke winning these last couple of weeks is very nice, but he's winning against coaches that were already ranked pretty low. So I would like to see Juke try to beat out coaches that were a lot higher on the power rankings, and then we could finally start moving him up quite a ways. But Juke played absolutely phenomenally against Crow this week. He made all the right predictions. His Magneton was the correct bring for this match, and I believe it was Specs, and yeah, he was able to get rid of the Mawile, and once that was gone, the rest of Juke's team was able to just go, just go ham against Crow. So I think Juke is definitely a force to be reckoned with in B division, and I don't think just because he's at number 11 you should take him lightly. He's definitely a really strong coach.
So next up at number 12, at number 10, we've got not Adam and the Arsenal Bombs, who, like I said earlier, won against Leonard following a crit on Necrozma, which was very unfortunate, and it would have been fun to see that match play out otherwise, but it happens, and Adam earns 2 spots in the power rankings.
Yeah, following that crit, he was able to get in a position where he was still able to win. Like, all crits aside, hacks aside, whatever, Adam was able to come out with the win there, and that's sometimes that's just how it goes. Hacks is part of the game, but Adam does move up 2 spots, so I think he's still a good enough coach to maybe not have to reprimand him for getting hacks during his match. So he sits at number 10 for right now. But above him at number 9, we have Gene and his Ottawa Gengars, who lost his match this week. And not only did he lose this match, he got 6-0'd. Now, I understand that Gene and his opponent Raven, they were in call during the match. I wasn't a part of it. I think they were saying stuff in the chat and whatnot, but I think they were just having fun. They were in the call, and they were just facing each other, and the match went on for a little while. But eventually, Gene just could not break the combination of was it Blissey or Chansey, and then Raven's the rest of his wall core. He had things like Corviknight and whatnot, and he was just able to dominate.
Raven's stall team is just absolutely disgusting.
It's gross. Especially when Gene lost all of his physical threats and only had to rely on his special threats in the end game. He just could not break the Chansey. Like, I'm pretty sure it's Chansey, right? It's not Blissey.
It's Chansey.
It's Chansey. Yeah, he just couldn't beat it. And you need to make sure that you keep your physical threats alive to be able to take that thing down, because Chansey is just a disgusting Pokemon with Teleport now.
So next up at number 8, we've got Joely and the Kattegat Corviknights. So, like Mam said earlier, he's one of our newcomers, and he actually pulled off a 6-0 against Charles this week with a Reuniclus who Charles had no answers to. Who Charles had absolutely 0 answers to due to not bringing Hydreigon for some reason. And Joely really took advantage of that and just swept like it should have.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how well Joel does for the rest of the weeks. He brought the proper Reuniclus set. He brought the Focus Blast, Stored Power, Calm Mind, and I believe it was Recover at the end. And that was all he needed, really. Once Joel was able to scout and get rid of things that beat that Reuniclus or phased it, like the Steelix with Roar, it was just a wrap. Like, I think Joel, he did a really good job in this match, and Reuniclus was definitely his win con, and he played it properly, and never let it get too low to the point where even a crit could take him out. So good job on Joel. He's sitting right in the middle there, and he moved up 6 spots. Let's see if he can keep moving up. But above him at number 7, we have Aaron the Baron and his Colchester Cabalians, another Coliseum coach. But he ended up losing this match this week, and he dropping a couple spots. And if I remember correctly, he was facing off against Pierre, and Pierre was rated at number 10 last week, and beating a coach with Aaron, who was at number 3. Aaron definitely just had to drop a few spots. Now, I think the match itself went back and forth a bit. They both brought coverage and tech for each other, but I think there's a pivotal point during the match where Celesteela dropped for Aaron, and Pierre was just able to get the upper hand on him in the end game. So I actually really like a couple things that Pierre brought for Aaron. Similarly, I like what Aaron brought against Pierre, but it was a good match. I actually think it was a really decent match for this division. But Aaron just could not keep up with the Pierre at the end in the end game, so he just had to drop to number 7.
Next up at number 6, we've got Pierre and his Pittsburgh Pussycats, who, like we just said, had a win over Aaron this week. And like we just said, that Rain team was just too much to overcome for Aaron, and once Celesteela went down, Pierre's team just ran through the rest of what was left of Aaron's side.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that Pierre has Zapdos anyways for Aaron's Celesteela. So he has one of the best counters to Celesteela originally. But I like that Pierre brought. I like his Swampert set. Like it wasn't exactly to abuse Rain at all. Like I don't actually even think he brought Rain, but his Swampert was Hidden Power Grass for Aaron's Seismitoad, and he brought rocks and stuff. I think Pierre, instead of bringing Rain, he was able to just bring complete counters to every single one of Aaron's Pokemon. That's a good prep on his part. Throws him off because Aaron was probably definitely expecting some rain. So Pierre, I think he'd really deserve this spot at number 6 right there. Moving up now to our number 5, we have Miles and his Bakersfield Bearticks, who actually ended up losing this week. His first loss in the season, and it was against our number 1 seed. It was against Ampha. A very good match, by the way. It actually could have gone either way, but Ampha was able to make sure to preserve the correct Pokemon in the end game. Miles, he made some proper predictions, but again, I think what he has problems with is kind of walling his opponent's team a little bit. Like, he definitely has the proper offense, but walling his opponent is a little bit different because of the fact that Slurpuff, yes, it can wish pass, it can do all that stuff, but it's not exactly a tried and true wall. Like you always see it more offensive in that sort of set. But Miles, he did a good job against Ampha. He was able to bring it down to a 2-0. So he does move down just to 1 spot, and I know for sure Miles will climb back up. He's a good coach. He has a good team. And I don't think there's anything stopping him. When he becomes headstrong, I think he really needs to make sure that he keeps his walls in check and make sure that his offense in the late game, they're still remaining healthy so that he can take on the rest of his opponent's team. But I think number 5 right now for Miles is a good fit.
Next up at number 4, we've got Raven and the Destined Lucarios, and Raven 6-0 Gene this week. And Gene, obviously one of the stronger coaches in B, coming down from A-League last season. And a very convincing 6-0 with that insanely disgusting stall team.
The stall was just too much for Gene's team. Like, I think Gene doesn't have too many
wins against hyper offense.
Yeah, Gene doesn't have too many bad matchups. I just think against Raven, it was one of the worst matchups that he could have had against Chansey. So, like you said, Raven, a very disgusting core in his team itself, and he has enough offense. with Victini, with Altaria, with Surfetch to take down Gene's walls as well. Raven sitting at number 4, I definitely expect Raven to keep moving up. So he's a good coach no matter what kind of draft he has. But sitting at number 3 above Raven, these top 3 are going to get more definitive as we continue on in the season rankings, guys. But number 3 we have Rizzo and his Hell Creek Hetzmash, who moved up 2 spots this week after his match against Rummy. Now again, facing against the lower ended seed for B division. I don't know how much it means. Obviously, it's still a win, and it's Rummy did a good job against Riss, but Riss was still able to once Riss was able to scout out most of Rummy's sets. Gardevoir kind of just went in. He was able to set it up and sweep with it in the late game. Like, even with the fact that Rummy still had a Melmetal in the back, at that point, Rummy could not risk bringing in the Melmetal in on a Mystical Fire, and Rissa was already at +2 with his Gardevoir, so he pretty much just had the game under wraps. There was just nothing Rummy could do against it. Even though Riss, I'm pretty sure, prepped for a couple mons that weren't exactly on Rummy's roster. Like, I think he brought Sucker Punch on Cinderace for Alakazam, which Rummy doesn't have anymore. I believe he dropped it for like Malueta or something. But yeah, and that could be our fault, Riss. We're sorry about that. If we didn't update the dock in time for you to see the proper sets. We do try and update the dock every single Monday to make sure that everyone has the proper teams to build for, but maybe we missed it out on this time. We apologize for that. But yeah, he was still able to pull out the win, so Riz at number 3 makes a lot of sense.
Next up at number 2, we've got PZZ and the Seattle Sharpedos, who went off with a pretty convincing win against Witcher at a 5-0 this week, and Witcher never really had any answer for PZZ as he kept pivoting into what he needed, and he got the chip he needed to pretty much sweep in the end with the meta champ.
Yeah, I agree. There's not too much to say. PZZ, he preserved everything he needed to. He didn't exactly care too much if his Porygon got toxic. He really was just using it as a pivot, and he did everything necessary to get into the right position to just break Witcher's team. I think he did a good job. I think he knows exactly how to prep for his opponent. Like, he sees Witcher with not too many walls on his side, and even though Witcher does have some very bulky Pokemon, PZZ just has the top Coco. He has the Lottie. He has the proper mons to that get enough coverage to actually break Witcher's team. So he definitely had the matchup, I think, that week. But saying that is not a testament to how well PZZ played this match. I think he did really well. But we could not exactly move him all the way up to number 1 because he was facing a coach pretty low on the rankings already. Our actual number 1 is going to be Ampha again and his Minnesota Twin Needles for the 4th week in a row. Ampha sits at number 1, and he played against Miles this week and was able to come out with a nice 2-0. It did come down really close. Of course, Ampha playing against the coach that was at number 4 last week. Definitely expecting a really tough matchup, but he was still able to come out with the win, and he's not going to move. I don't know when he's going to move down at all. I don't think he's ever going to move down, but Ampha sitting at number 1. No one's dethroned him yet, and yeah, I still expect Ampha to continuously keep getting better and better from this point forward. He has a really good team, and not too much to say after that. Just a really powerful coach. So that's going to wrap up B power rankings, guys. So now we can finally go up to our A division's power rankings, and if you want, Tyler, you can start us off with the bottom there.
So at number 16 and native for the second week in a row, we've got Piranha and the Washington Walreins. And Piranha faced Techno this week and just couldn't overcome Techno's threats. So sadly, he stays at the bottom of the PRs this week.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in the matchup. I believe if you watch that match again, if Piranha let the Mega Scizor step up to +2, he got destroyed by Bullet Punch. And I'm not sure if Piranha exactly knew that in the matchup coming, but that's exactly what happened. Techno was able to just get one Swords Dance up on Scizor, and it was just a wrap. Bullet Punch cleaned up the rest of Piranha's team. Unfortunately, Techno's a pretty decent coach. Obviously, he was sitting at number 7 last week, but with Piranha sitting at number 16 again, we can't justify moving him up at all. So we're sorry about that. But we know that Piranha, he's still a decent coach, and this is a really tough division. So it's going to be hard to say whether we'll see him move up or down. But for numbers 16, Piranha sits there. We can move up to our number 15, who we have at Aces, and is Tennessee Volcanians. Moving down one spot this week from our last week, we had him at number 14. He actually faced off against Beater this week, and it came down pretty close. I'm sure Aces, with his new team now, with his new stylish team, he has the Mega Sableye now, the Suicune, all that stuff, the Skarmory. He did have a really good matchup, I think, against Beater, and his Mega Lopunny. But Beater brought all the right responses for stuff that was pretty already showcased off in the earlier weeks, like Aces again bringing the Slush Rush Octozolt, which of course does work every single time he brings it, but it's becoming kind of clear now that he wants to bring it, and it doesn't mean that the coaches in A Division don't see it coming. It can be predictable to the point where you might see a Scarfed Crobat kind of come, and that's exactly what Beater did. He brought Scarfed Crobat with Heat Wave, make sure that Octozolt doesn't get too crazy, and Aces, he did well to bring it down to a 2-0, but he still ended up losing, unfortunately. So he's sitting at number 15 right now.
Next up at number 14, we've got Eagle and the Ottawa Staraptors. And Eagle played a very good match against Skyquake this week, but unfortunately could not overcome Skyquake's team, as it's a very powerful squad. But that just means Eagle had to go down 2 spots in this week's power rankings.
Yeah, I agree. He was already at number 12 last week. So just moving down 2 spots from facing off against Sky, who was our number 15. It makes sense that he would have to move down to our number 14 right there. Still a very good team, and facing off against Skyquake, who arguably had the best draft in the season. It was a good showing that he was able to bring it down to a 2-0, but Skyquake was definitely able to finally get some revenge and get a win this week. He's sitting at the bottom for the past couple of weeks, but finally nabbing a win, and let's see if this is his climb. So above Eagle there, we have our number 13 in Stumbles and his Cleveland Cresselias, who still actually has not been able to grab a win. And I know it seems weird to put him over Eagle, who has a win, but Stumbles' team is still incredibly good, and I think all the coaches that he's been facing are coaches that were sitting up pretty high up on the rankings. And he faced you this week, Tyler, and you could probably say how well he played in this match if you want to, if you have some words on Stumbles.
The match itself was actually very close. It was a lot closer than it seemed, with Sylveon on 2% and Uxie on 1% at the end of the match. But unfortunately, what did him in was that one very unfortunate confusion hit himself with the Zapdos at the start of the match. And after that, I never really looked back, as he had to sack his whole Tapu Fini to my Mega Pidgeot just to break the sub, and then I had Scarf Jirachi and Scarf Infernape in the back to just clean with whatever way I wanted at the end. And he had to play for hacks at that point, which is always unfortunate and doesn't really pay off most of the time. And yeah,
Yeah,
it was a decent match. And if it wasn't for that hacks, it would have been very close and interesting to see how it would have turned out. But
yeah. Stumbles. I know how good of a coach he is, and he does well to preserve his win cons in the late game, and he makes sure that like he sees opportune moments to bring them in. So it's just, I don't think Stumbles was able to get his footing in this match, and some of the hacks might have caused him to get a little bit tilted there. But either way, Stumbles, I think he'll still be able to bounce back. It's just for right now, he kind of has to drop. He hasn't been able to nab a win yet. It's still early in the season, and we're, A Division is a group of really strong coaches. So even sitting at number 13, it's still pretty impressive.
So at number 12, we've got Skyquake and his Lancaster Landorus. And like Mam said earlier, Skyquake has been pretty low in the past couple of weeks after being at number 1 post-draft. And Skyquake finally able to pick off his first win of the season against Eagle. And Skyquake, obviously the A Division winner last season, so it's kind of tough to see him so low in the PRs, but I'm sure he's gonna turn his season around and find a way to make his way back up there.
Yeah, I agree. Skyquake, I know how good of a coach he is, and he plays his pieces properly, especially in the late game against Eagle this week. He identified that the Garchomp was scarfed. It was pretty clear. And he made sure he was able to preserve the Gliscor and the Diancie, because Garchomp could not spam either his Dragon or Ground type stab when Diancie and Gliscor were still alive. So in that case, Skyquake was pretty much saying checkmate, because Eagle could only really lock himself into one move that could KO just one of Skyquake's mons, which he did really well to preserve them both. But moving up to our number 11 spot, we got Simi and his Blue Collar Blossoms, who had to move down just one spot this week. He did end up losing to Cheese this week. It was a really good match, I believe. Of course, Simi is always a good coach, and he has some decent matches. Bring some heat sometimes, or he did a good job trying to pivot around Cheese's threats. Like, obviously Cheese's team is somewhat bulky in its already highly synergetic ways, but I think Simi, he just could not exactly find the right pivoting. He couldn't get the momentum properly. Every single time Cheese brought in his walls, he was able to just teleport out with the Slowbro. He has the Mega Slowbro, of course, but keeping it non-Mega'd for the beginning of the match makes sense for Cheese. But again, Simi was just too pressured by all of Cheese's Pokemon, and ended up kind of on the back end there. So Simi, I know how good of a coach he is, but he's just going to drop the one spot, and let's see if he can continue on to grow in the next couple of weeks.
So next up at number 10, we've got Star and his Lucky Liberos, and Star faced off against you this week, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. Once you were able to break his defensive core, Stall is not my cup of tea. And obviously, the second you thing with Stall is, once you break one of the mons that is very good against you, the others are pretty much they really need to have good synergy together. And once one of those mon falls, it's pretty hard to switch into all the offensive threats on the other side. That's exactly what happened here. As soon as you were able to break the defensive core, it just was over for Star.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you wholeheartedly that Stall itself has a kind of weakness to if one of its components is cracked a little bit, it has a little bit of damage. Some of the walls start to fall over as well. due to that fact. I find that when it comes to stall, it's better not to run coverage for stall. It's more trying to find neutral, hard hitting damage that will hit everything neutrally. And so I saw how good Specs Curum was in this match, and once I was able to break down a few of Star's pieces, uh, Specs Curum just came in and just spammed Ice Beam, and Star didn't really have that much of a response for it. He did an amazing job in the early game, trying to wear down my pieces itself and trying to make sure that his Stealth and Clefable stayed really healthy. But I don't think he anticipated Melmetal to come, and Melmetal was able to also break down a few of his Valkor. So definitely a good player in Star. I know how playing him again this season. I haven't played him in so long. I can tell how good of a coach he's gotten, and we might see him continuously climb up, but right now he has to drop a few spots from our number 8 last week to number 10, and we hope to see him climb some more. But at number 9, right above Star, is Zombie and his Victoria Bikinis, who actually got a loss this week against Zane. It came down really close. That's why it's kind of hard to move Zombie down at all. He played against Zane, who was arguably one of the better coaches so far in the beginning part of this season. Zane has not dropped from the top 3. So playing against one of the top coaches and almost winning that match, in fact, I believe it came down so close that it might have just come down to which mon to preserve properly in the late game, because Zombie almost had that match. Both of them were kind of in the back end trying to gain momentum back, but Zane was able to preserve the right Pokemon in the end game to not get swept. But Zombie did a really fantastic job, and being at number 9 is hard to see for Zombie, because I know how good of a coach he is, and he's always trying to sit up there at number 1 or even in the top 3. But I know he'll climb up in the next couple of weeks for sure. At number 8, we have Tyler and his Winnipeg Weaviles. He's in the call with us, and you moved up 5 spots this week from your match against Stumbles, and we already talked about that. But I really did enjoy that match itself. You had a lot of strong plays in that match, especially with the workup sub Mega Pidgeot. That definitely added a lot of pressure to Stumbles' team. I still wanted to see Hyper Beam Mega Pidgeot. I know that you probably didn't want to bring that, but that would have been insane if you brought Hyper Beam for Stumbles' Zapdos, because I'm pretty sure at +1 Hyper Beam would have KO'd. But I know that you probably had coverage for something else.
Yeah, I had the wait for the Ferrothorn.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Mega Pidgeot, I've been seeing since the start. Mega Pidgeot is an absolute monster. I love the mon, and I just had to draft it to show it off a little.
I mean, 100% accurate Hurricanes, you can't go wrong. And having Heat Wave makes a lot of sense as well. I still think, like, if you have workup, just spam Hurricane. It's not like you really need Heat Wave. But I can understand your thought process there.
There's not many resists to Flying Stab to start, and Mega Pidgeot is just so strong that Hurricane hits pretty much everything, like insanely strong.
Yeah, even if it resists.
It doesn't have a lot of coverage, which is why it's so low, but it just hits so hard with Hurricane that you don't even need that coverage anyways. So
I agree, and you facing off against Stumbles, Stumbles' main wall, being Finny, ended up dropping to your +1 Hurricane, I believe, and from there it kind of snowballed because Stumbles had to kind of pivot out properly and make sure that Pidgeot did not come back in, but I'm pretty sure it was the Zapdos that took down your Pidgeot in the end.
Yeah, I decided to sack the Pidgeot because at that point I was already set up anyways, and with the rocks being up, there was just no point in me saving it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just went for the damage on Zapdos.
But I
it was pretty good because it allowed me to set up my my Sneasel right after coming
Yep.
in on the Zapdos.
Swords Dance Sneasel, definitely a good bring. I did not expect that when you brought it in. I thought maybe it was gonna be like Bandit or something. Uh, but once I saw Swords Dance, I was like, oh no, Stumbles did not really have too many answers. He didn't. I don't think his Terrakion wasn't scarfed this match. I believe. I think it was Life Orb. Um, Actually, if I remember correctly.
Having Fini go down just made Sneasel so much.
Oh
more
yeah,
threat.
for sure. Did you end up having Poison Jab on that Sneasel?
I did.
Okay, which makes sense, I guess.
I had no Dark Stab that match, but I never killed Zam anyways. Zam always killed coming in, so it wasn't really made for the Zam. It was just made to break most of his team.
Exactly.
And just Okoing that Pharaoh was so big.
Oh yeah, 100%. It was you were at +2 Icicle Crash and just KO'd the Ferrothorn.
+2 Break Break.
Oh, it was Brick Break. That's what it did. Yeah, Brick Break. It made sense. And the Ferrothorn was Rocky Helmet. I'm not too familiar with the matchup, so I'm not sure exactly what the Rocky Helmet was for. But it could have been for like U-turn spam or something.
I mean, I've got Jirachi, I've got Sneasel, I've got Infernape. Most of my mons are physical, so Rocky Helmet made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I guess so. That makes sense. But yeah, you were able to nab that win, that 5-0 against Stumbles, and jump all the way to number 8. So I think you did an amazing job with that. You want to move up to number 7?
Number 7, we've got Beater in the DC Darmanitan. And Beater with that win over Aces this week. And it was a pretty close match, but Beater with the Scarf Crobat had that answer for the Arctozolt in Hail, which seems to be a problem for a lot of people, surprisingly.
Yeah, you don't see it coming really, but
yeah, and Beater had that answer he had to keep it until the late game, which made it a bit harder to save that diff, but Beater was able to pull off that nice 2-0 and
yeah,
unfortunately had to go down one spot even though he won, but
yeah,
he pretty much stayed neutral.
So you guys see there that Beater dropped, he was at number 6 last week, and now he's at number 7. And that's not to say anything against Beater. He did a great job overcoming Aces and his threats, but the match came down a bit closer than comfortable. Beater was trying to find his way around Aces' wall core, and Lopunny was definitely the way to do it. Like, Lopunny was one of his answers for Mega Sableye. Skarmory if he had coverage, but Skarmory was very defensive with Rocky Helmet, so he just couldn't get around that. But again, like I was saying, he had to move down just because of the fact that the coaches above him, they played phenomenally this week, and I couldn't move Beater above the rest of the coaches there. So as you can see above Beater at number 6, we have Techno and his Texas Magnemites, who moved up one spot from number 7 last week. And Techno went up against Piranha, and like I said earlier on, I know Piranha was sitting at the bottom there, but Techno did an amazing job of removing anything that kind of countered Mega Scizor. And once Mega Scizor was able to get up that +2 in Swords Dance, it was just Bullet Punch, and it O-code everything on Piranha's team. Like, Mega Gallade did not take it. I think it was a Nidoking or Nidoqueen did not take it. And I think Techno knew exactly how he needed to position himself properly to get into that position. Like I said, he just did a great job. It was a great showing by Techno, and he moves up one spot because of that.
Next up at number 5, we've got Ominous Draco and the Croatian Crawdons. And with that loss to Toxic last week, he third guy in 4 divisions that gets dethroned from the number 1 spot. And it was a very good match, but that he just got done by that Shaman at the end.
Yeah.
That Shaman was just too good.
Now we'll talk on Toxic later, but definitely did have an interesting showing in that match. Ominous, OD, he's a good coach, and at number 1 last week, he was trying to prove out how good of a coach he was. now facing off against Toxic, who was sitting at number 5 last week. Definitely dropping all the way down to where Toxic was last week. And obviously OD is a great coach. I'm sure he'll climb back up. Might even make number 1 again. Who knows? But Toxic definitely had a good handle on him the entire way. So we'll talk about him later. But sitting at number 4 above OD is Zane and his St. Louis Cardinals, who, even though he won this week against Zombie, he did move down 1 spot. Nothing against Zane. He played it well. It came down to a 1-0, and it could have gone either way. But the coaches above him still outperformed, outshined, I think, just because of how the nature of the match. It came down so close. Zombie almost would have taken that match if it weren't for a few case scenarios. But he played it well, and he made sure to preserve the 1 mon that he needed in order for Dragapult and Zombie's other threats to not sweep him in the end game. But at number 4, I feel like it's a good fit for Zane for right now. So
next up at number 3, we've got Cheese and the Michigan Manectrics, and Cheese played against Simi this week. And Cheese just outplayed Simi, and he just never looked back that match, as he got a pretty comfortable 3-0. And that 3-0 win gave him the 1 spot up in the PRs it broke the top 3 for Cheese this week.
Yeah, I will say Cheese brings some very interesting sets, like Toxic, Rest, Zera Aura. I forget. I think it was had Discharge or whatever. Very interesting. I don't know how often I ever see Rest, Zera Aura or anything like that. But who knows if a proper offensive set would have been better there. But I think he really wanted some kind of response for Simi's Thunderous. So it's not a bad response at all. Thunderous can't really spam his electric type moves against Zera Aura. But Cheese, he always comes up with these interesting sets, and he's able to make them work for the most part. Able to grab him momentum when need be, get his offensive threats in, and then just start wrecking shop. So definitely moves up 1 spot due to that win against Simi.
Next up at number 2, we've got yours truly, Mams and the Durham Dragonaires. And for the 3rd week in a row, Mams stays in the top 3. And Mams had a pretty good match earlier against Star, like I said. And once he broke that defensive core of Star, Kier was just too much to overtake. And that's pretty much it. It was enough to keep him that number 2 spot.
Yeah, I think for the last couple weeks, all my opponents were sitting at the number 8 spot. I faced Eagle, who was at number 8 initially, and then Stumbles, who was at number 8 in the week 1, and then Star at number 2, week 2. So they've all been kind of sitting in the middle there. Not enough for me to say, let's move me up to number 1 because of all those wins. I still think coaches that are Zane, Cheese, OD, Techno, all those coaches, they still have a really good chance of maybe overtaking me, and I'm really interested to see how it does how they do against me, because I know my next couple of weeks they're going to be really tough. I have a really packed schedule in these next couple of weeks. I face Zane this week too, and it's going to be pretty tough. But yeah, I liked my prep against Star this week. I think I brought the proper responses. He brought a bunch of walls. I brought a bunch of wall breakers, and that was kind of my case going into the match. But at number 1, our real number 1, we're gonna reveal is Toxic, who probably should have been number 1 a long time ago, but we finally get to see why he's number 1 in a division. He earned that spot, showcasing off against Omnis Draco this week, and he made sure to get rid of everything that could stop that Shaman. Shaman was so good this week. He brought Synthesis, Earth Power, Energy Ball, and Psych Up, and knowing that his opponent has a Raikou in in the back, or might potentially come to set up, very smart tech to bring Psych up just in case Raikou wanted to set up on him. I appreciate that tech. Like that's definitely those are sets that you want to see when it comes to our number one coaches in the league. And if he continuously belts out like tech like that each and every week, it's going to be hard for coaches to predict him. So who knows if he moves down at all? But undefeated Toxic sitting at number one, moving up 4 spots from last week. And yeah, that's gonna be it. That's gonna wrap up our A division, guys. Tyler, you wanna say any more words on these 4 divisions?
You guys all suck, and see you next week.
There it is, guys. We all suck, and let's make sure to impress Tyler for the next coming weeks, okay? But for right now, we're glad that you guys are enjoying the power rankings, and if you want to see more of them, please comment, likes, all that stuff, and we'll see you in the week 4 power rankings. Take it easy, guys.